Welcome, and thank you for being here. These are true stories shared anonymously about cheating, confession, heartbreak, and healing. Let the rain soften the edges as the story unfolds. If you're still awake, tell me what made you press play tonight. Story 1. The box in my childhood closet. I found the secret to my marriage in a dusty shoebox, tucked behind my old ballet slippers in my parents' house. I wasn't looking for it. I was looking for a photo album, something to prove that happiness wasn't just a story I'd told myself. I was looking for evidence of a time before the quiet, before the distance in my husband Ben's eyes became a permanent landscape. The box was unassuming, white with a faded gold stripe. Inside, it wasn't filled with my childhood treasures, but with his, and it contained the reason our 10-year marriage was a beautifully constructed lie. The morning we left for my parents' anniversary weekend was like any other in our quiet suburban home. The Keurig hissed, filling the kitchen with the scent of dark roast. Ben was already dressed, scrolling through his phone at the island, his toast untouched. "You packed the good bottle of wine for your dad?" he asked, not looking up. His voice was pleasant, efficient. It was the voice he used with clients. "Right by the door," I said, watching the way the September sun caught the silver in his hair. I remembered being a deep, chaotic brown. There were 2 subtle cracks in that normal morning. The first was his phone, which he placed face down on the counter with a soft, definitive click when I came near. A new habit, maybe 6 months old. The second was the way he squeezed my shoulder as he passed, a gesture that felt more like a pat on the back of a colleague after a long meeting than a husband's touch. I told myself it was stress. The promotion, the mortgage, the silent, unspoken question of children we kept deferring. I told myself this was just what long-term love looked like after a decade. Comfortable, a little worn at the seams, but strong in its foundations. I was an expert at telling myself stories. The drive was filled with NPR and polite commentary on the passing scenery. We fell into our well-rehearsed roles for my family. Ben was the charming, successful son-in-law, helping my dad with the grill, laughing at my mother's stories. He held my hand during the toast. His palm was warm and dry. I felt a surge of silly, desperate hope. See, this is real. We are real. Later, in my old childhood bedroom twin bed pushed together for us, floral comforter from high school that hope evaporated. He was already asleep, or pretending to be, turned toward the wall. I lay there, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling, feeling like a ghost in my own past. That's when I remembered the photo album I wanted, the one with pictures of my grandparents. It was probably in the closet. The closet was a time capsule of my youth. Sweaters that smelled of mothballs and teenage perfume. Yearbooks, my old flute case. I reached for the high shelf where my mom stored memory boxes, and my hand brushed against something that didn't belong. The white shoebox, It was heavier than it should be. I pulled it down, curious. Maybe it was my old love letters from high school boyfriends, something to give me a private smile. I sat on the floor, the worn pink carpet familiar under my knees, and lifted the lid. The first thing I saw was a ring. Not my ring. A simple, elegant platinum band resting on a bed of folded papers. Beneath it, a stack of photographs. My breath hitched. The top photo was of Ben younger, his hair that deep brown I missed. He was laughing, his arm around a woman with long, dark hair, and a smile that seemed to capture all the light in the room. They were on a beach somewhere. He was looking at her the way he used to look at me, the way he hadn't looked at me in years. My hands began to shake. I sifted through the photos. Ben and this woman at a Christmas market. Ben and this woman holding a toddler with curly black hair. Ben and this woman, older now, the toddler a young boy, standing in front of a house with a sold sign. The dates on the backs, scrawled in Ben's handwriting, spanned 7 years. 7 years. I reached for the papers. There were cards. To my beautiful Alina, my heart, my wife. Happy anniversary. The date was 4 years ago. A life insurance policy. A beneficiary form. The name listed was Alina Vasquez. A birth certificate for a child, Mateo Benjamin Vasquez. Father, Benjamin Carter. My stomach dropped through the floor. The room tilted. Wife, child, a family. A whole other complete family. I must have made a sound, a choked gasp, because Ben stirred in the bed. Maya, you okay? His voice was thick with sleep. I couldn't speak. I sat on the floor of my childhood closet, holding the proof that my entire adult life was a secondary act, a supporting role in a play I didn't know was running. The betrayal was so vast, so architectural. It felt less like a stab wound, and more like the ground dissolving beneath my feet. I wasn't just not his only love. I wasn't his only wife. The legalities swirled in my head, a hurricane of confusion and horror. How? Why? The man sleeping 15 feet from me was a stranger, a bigamist, a man with a son. I want to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where your understanding of reality just shattered? Where a single piece of information rewrote every happy memory, turning it into something hollow and suspicious? In the comments, tell me about a time your gut knew something your mind refused to accept. What was the final piece of evidence? I didn't confront him that night. I carefully, meticulously, placed every item back in the box. I took photos of everything with my phone. The ring, the cards, the birth certificate. My hands were steady, cold. I was in shock, a state of eerie, hyper-focused calm. I slid the box back into its hiding place. I crawled into bed beside him, my body rigid, lying as far from his warmth as possible. I stared at the ceiling until the stars faded into the morning gray. I was planning. The next 2 days were an Oscar-worthy performance of normalcy. I smiled. I laughed. I agreed when Ben suggested we leave a day early, citing work stress. I felt like I was watching a film of my own life from a great, cold distance. car, the silence was different. It was no longer comfortable. It was charged with the screaming truth sitting between us. I waited until we were home in our kitchen, the site of so many mundane morning routines. He was pouring himself a glass of water. "We need to talk," I said. My voice was flat, alien. "Okay," he said, leaning against the counter, a faint, patient smile on his face. The smile he used when he thought I was about to discuss vacation plans or a home renovation. I found a box at my parents' house. In my closet, I watched his face. The smile didn't vanish, it froze, then slowly drained away, leaving a pale, waxy blankness. A white shoebox with a ring in it, and photos, and a birth certificate for Mateo Benjamin Vasquez. The glass of water slipped from his hand. It hit the tile floor and exploded, a galaxy of shards and water blooming at his feet. He didn't move. He just stared at me, his eyes wide with a terror so profound it was almost childlike. "Maya," it was a whisper, a plea. "Who is Alina?" I asked, my voice still terrifyingly calm. He sank into a kitchen chair, his head in his hands. The story that tumbled out was a cliché wrapped in a tragedy. He'd met Alina in his late 20s, on a business trip that turned permanent. A whirlwind romance. A quick marriage abroad. A pregnancy. He claimed he'd felt trapped, that it was a mistake, that he'd wanted out but didn't know how when the baby came. Then he'd met me. "You were everything she wasn't," he said, tears streaming down his face. Calm, stable for my world. I thought I could compartmentalize. I thought I could fix the old life, end it cleanly, before you ever found out. I sent them money, I visited. But she didn't want a divorce. She wanted a father for Mateo. I was stuck. "You were married to her when you married me," I stated, the legal horror dawning fully. "Our marriage is a fraud. It's not just adultery, Ben. It's a crime." He nodded, a miserable, pathetic gesture. "I know. I've been living in hell, trying to be two men." A violent, bitter laugh escaped me. "Trying to be two men, you succeeded. You were a husband and father there, and a husband here. And I was the idiot wife in the quiet suburban home, the placeholder." The calm shattered. "You had a son. You have a 7-year-old son. All those times you were traveling for work, you were with your family. Your real family. This is my real family." He cried, reaching for me. I recoiled as if from a snake. "Don't you touch me. Don't you ever touch me again." The finality in my voice silenced him. "You need to leave. Now, go to your other home. You have one, after all." The aftermath was a slow-motion avalanche of legal and emotional ruin. I hired a lawyer who used words like void ab initio and criminal bigamy. My marriage was legally erased, as if it never was. I was not a divorcee. I was a single woman who had been living a fiction. The financial betrayal was deeper. Joint accounts had been funding his other life for years. The house, bought with my savings, was entangled. But the money felt insignificant compared to the theft. He had stolen my years, my trust, my chance to have a family with someone who was fully, legally, emotionally mine. He had made every moment of intimacy, every whispered forever, a grotesque joke. climax didn't come in a screaming fight. It came in a sterile conference room 2 months later. It was just the two of us for the last time. He looked hollow, broken. "I am so sorry, Maya. I never meant to hurt you. I loved you. I love you." I looked at this man I had shared a bed, a home, and a decade with. I searched for the person I loved, but he was gone, if he ever existed at all. "You don't get to say that," I said, my voice quiet and steady. "Love doesn't do this. Love doesn't build a life on a foundation of someone else's suffering. You wanted 2 lives. You got none. I hope you can be a good father to your son. That's the only decent thing left for you to do." I stood up, my legs steady. "Don't contact me again." I walked out of that room, out of the legal building, and into the cold autumn sunlight. The air felt sharp and clean in my lungs. I was homeless, in a way. Not physically, but existentially. The story of my life had been ripped up. I was left with blank pages, and for the first time, that didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a brutal, terrifying, and absolutely necessary beginning. I started over with the only thing he couldn't steal, myself. And sometimes, in the quiet of my new, smaller apartment, I look at my own, unshared walls, and think I finally know exactly what is real, because I built it alone, one honest brick at a time. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's one of the hardest things I've ever shared, but there's a strange strength in not hiding the broken pieces anymore. If this resonated with you, or if you've ever faced a betrayal that rewired your world, please share your thoughts or your own story in the comments below. Let's be a community for each other. And if you want to hear more stories of survival, of picking up the pieces, please hit subscribe and like this video. You're not alone. Story 2. The message on his work phone. You never think the life you've built is made of glass. You walk on it every day, trusting it to hold you, until one evening, you hear a single, sharp crack, and suddenly, you're falling through everything you thought was solid. My name is Maya, and my crack came from a work phone left charging on the kitchen counter. Our normal was a quiet, suburban kind of peace. Ben and I had been married for 12 years. 2 kids, Lily, 8, and Noah. 6 a house with a mortgage we could just manage. And a rhythm to our days that felt less like a rut and more like a well-worn, comfortable path. That Tuesday had been like any other. I'd done the school run, fought with Noah about wearing his rain boots, answered 100 work emails from the kitchen table, and started chopping vegetables for dinner. Ben was late, which wasn't unusual. He was a regional manager for a logistics company, and his days were a blur of spreadsheets and site visits. I heard his key in the door just as the onions were starting to sizzle. He came in looking tired, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek that smelled of autumn air and coffee, and went to shed his work persona, dumping his blazer, briefcase, and that damned black work phone on the counter. "Long one," he sighed, heading upstairs to change. I finished sautéing, the mundane act of of cooking a kind of meditation. The kitchen was warm, filled with the golden hour light filtering through the maple tree outside. Lily's half-finished math worksheet was on the table. Noah's tiny sneakers were by the door. This was my kingdom. This was our life, but there were cracks if I'd chosen to look. The way Ben had started taking that work phone into the bathroom with him. How he'd recently updated the passcode, saying it was a new company security policy. The fact that our "how was your day" conversations had become logistical briefings, devoid of the silly anecdotes or shared frustrations that used to thread us together. I told myself it was stress, the weight of providing, the universal drift of long-term marriage. You make excuses for the silence because the alternative is too terrifying to name. So there I was, stirring a pot of chili when the phone on the counter buzzed. Not a call, a notification. A preview line of text flashed on the locked screen. The backlight was a cold blue square in my warm, golden kitchen. I couldn't make out the words. It buzzed again and again, a rapid-fire sequence. My hand stilled on the wooden spoon. It was probably his team, a work group chat blowing up about some last-minute crisis. But something, a cold trickle in my veins that had nothing to do with the autumn evening, made me step closer. The phone buzzed a fourth time. This preview was longer. I saw the sender's name, J, and the first few words. Can't stop thinking about last night. You're the sentence truncated. My own breath truncated with it. Last night. Ben had been at a networking dinner. He'd come home after 11, smelling faintly of wine and garlic, and had fallen asleep almost immediately. I'd felt a pang of loneliness then, staring at his back in the dark. Now, that pang metastasized into a sharp, physical nausea. The phone went dark. I stood there, my hand frozen in midair. The sizzle of the onions, now an accusatory hiss. The world had not yet shattered, but I felt the seismic shift deep in the bedrock of me. Have you ever had a moment where your body knows the truth before your mind can catch up? Where a single line of text, a mere glimpse, rewrites your entire history? I didn't touch the phone. I couldn't. Touching it would make it real. Instead, I turned the stove off, my movements precise and robotic. I called the kids down, set the table, poured the milk. Ben came back down in sweats, smiling, asking about Noah's day at school. I watched his mouth form words, saw the casual way his eyes flicked to the black rectangle on the counter. Did they linger a fraction of a second too long? Was there a hint of anxiety in that glance? Or was I now seeing everything through a lens of cracked glass? We ate. I tasted nothing. I answered questions on autopilot. I was an actor in my own life, reading lines from a script that had just been revealed as a lie. When he finally picked up the phone, his thumb swiftly swiping away the notifications without even looking at them. A small, tight smile on his face, I knew. The casual dismissal was more damning than if he deflinched. The next week was a special kind of hell. a performance of normalcy staged over a widening abyss. I became a detective in my own home, fueled by a quiet, desperate rage. I checked credit card statements of few charges for a boutique hotel downtown, labeled as client lunches. I noted the increasing late nights, the new cologne, the emotional distance that now had a name, and the name was Jay. I accessed our old, shared email inbox, a relic from early in our marriage we used for household stuff. I typed Jay into the search bar, my heart a hammer against my ribs. Nothing. Then, on a whim, I searched for the hotel name. And there it was, a confirmation email from 6 months ago for a weekend conference Ben had attended, forwarded to this old account by mistake. The listed attendee was Benjamin Miller, and the guest, Julia Harlow. Julia, not just J.A. name, a person with a last name, a person he'd taken to a weekend conference. I remembered that weekend. He'd brought me back a silly souvenir mug from the hotel gift shop. I'd used it every day for my tea. I ran to the kitchen cabinet, yanked it out a white ceramic mug with a cartoonish skyline. I held it, this token of his betrayal, and then I dropped it into the trash. It didn't even break. It just landed with a dull thud on a bag of coffee grounds. The confrontation didn't happen in a scream. It happened in a whisper. It was a Thursday night, the kids finally asleep, the house holding its breath. We were on the couch, a sitcom playing on mute, a canyon of silence between us. I couldn't live in the glass house anymore. I had to jump or I would suffocate. Who is Julia Harlow? The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Ben went very still. The color drained from his face, leaving a pale, waxy mask. He didn't insult my intelligence by asking who. He just stared at the silent TV, his jaw working. Maya, he finally said, his voice thick. Was it just the conference? Or is it still happening? He put his head in his hands. A long, shuddering exhale. It's over. It ended months ago. It was a mistake, a horrible, stupid mistake. The confirmation was an ice bath. Hearing the words made them true in a new, irrevocable way. How long? My voice was a stranger's, flat and cold. Almost a year, he whispered. But it's been over for 3 months. I ended it. I swear. I couldn't live with myself. A year. A whole year of lies. Of kisses that meant nothing. Of family dinners where he was across from me in body only. The false hope was a sickly, tempting thing. It was over. He ended it. He was remorseful. Maybe this was the crisis we needed to fix what was broken. Maybe we could go to therapy, rebuild. The part of me that was still his wife, the mother of his children, the builder of that glass house, clutched at that fragile thread. I asked for details, a masochistic need to know the shape of the ghost that had haunted my marriage. He told me she worked in a different department, that it started as friendship, then drinks. Then he said it was never about love. He said he loved me, loved the kids, that he was trapped in his own stupidity and fear. He cried, real, messy tears. I sat there, dry-eyed, carved out and hollow. I told him I needed time. I told him he had to sleep in the guest room. I told him we would tell the kids he was having back problems. The lies, it seemed, were now a family business. For a few days, we moved through the house like ghosts, speaking in polite, logistical terms about kids' schedules and grocery lists. He was desperate, penitent, bringing me coffee, doing all the chores, looking at me with eyes full of a hope I couldn't share. I almost believed it. I almost let the narrative of the mistake we overcame start to take root. Then, on Sunday morning, while he was taking the kids to the park to give me space, his personal phone buzzed on the coffee table. He'd forgotten it. The screen lit up. A text preview from Julia. It read, "I know you said we can't talk, but I am pregnant. 8 weeks. We need to figure this out." The world didn't go black. It went blindingly, painfully white. Every sound drained away. I just stared at those words. Pregnant. 8 weeks. 3 months, Heidi said. It had been over for 3 months. The math was a brutal, simple equation. The false hope shattered, not into pieces, but into dust. When he returned, the kids' laughter a cruel soundtrack. I was waiting in the living room. His personal phone was in my lap. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at him, at the man I had loved for half my life, and I saw a stranger capable of a deception so profound it stole the air from my lungs. "You lied," I said, holding up the phone. "It's not over. She's pregnant." The look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated terror. Not for me, not for us, but for himself. The carefully constructed penitent facade crumbled, revealing the panicked, cornered man beneath. Maya, it was one time. After I ended it, it was a slip, a moment of weakness. She was upset. Stop. The word was final. Just stop. You don't get to explain this. You don't get to define this moment with your excuses. I stood up. The numbness was receding, replaced by a clear, cold fury. You have created another family. Your mistake has a heartbeat. This isn't a crisis we fix. This is the end of the life we had. The climax wasn't a dramatic fight. It was a quiet unraveling. It was me calling my sister to come get the kids for a few days. It was Ben sitting slumped on the stairs, repeating "I am sorry" like a broken mantra that had lost all meaning. It was me in our bedroom, packing a suitcase, my hands moving while my mind was 1,000 miles away, already in the bleak, unknown country of life after. The heart of the story wasn't in the betrayal itself, but in the moment I realized that the man I was mourning, faithful Ben, the husband of my history, had never really existed, at least not for the past year. He was a ghost I'd been in love with. The real man was sitting on the stairs, having blown apart our world for something he claimed was meaningless. Now, I live in a small apartment that smells of new paint and my own loneliness. The kids are with me half the week, their laughter echoing in rooms that are too empty. We are navigating the paperwork of an ending. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I think about that other family, the one growing in the womb of a woman named Julia. think about the child who will call Ben Dad, and I wonder if the life we built was so fragile that it could be undone by a text on a work phone. Was it ever truly strong to begin with? I am learning that survival isn't about moving on, but about learning to carry the weight of what was lost and building a new strength from its broken pieces. Thank you for listening to my story. It's a pain I never imagined sharing, but there's a strange solace in not carrying it alone. If you've ever faced a betrayal that redefined your world, or if you're just trying to understand the complexities of trust, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories remind us we're not alone in these messy human experiences. If this resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more real, raw stories about love, loss, and the difficult road to resilience. Story 3. The secret my daughter kept for me. I never thought I'd be grateful for a global pandemic. It sounds terrible, but that lockdown spring, the one that shrunk our world to the four walls of this quiet suburban home, is what finally gave me the silence to hear the truth. The truth my 12-year-old daughter, Lily, had been carrying alone for 2 years. My name is Sarah. Before everything, I would have told you my life was comfortably predictable. I am a graphic designer, married to David for 15 years. We had the classic suburban rhythm: early alarms, packed lunches, work calls from the home office, shuttling Lily to soccer and piano. David was a financial planner, steady and reliable, or so I believed. Our marriage wasn't a fireworks show, but it was warm. It was home. The cracks, when they started, were so fine you could mistake them for the grain in the wood. It began with David's new project. A demanding client, he said, required late nights and weekend calls. His phone, which used to lie casually on the kitchen counter, now lived in his pocket, screen down. He'd take calls in the garden, speaking in a low, earnest murmur I'd tell myself was professional discretion. Then came the emotional distance, a glass wall between us I kept polishing, thinking it was a smudge on my end. He stopped laughing at my dumb jokes. His hugs became brief, logistical. I blamed stress. I blamed myself. Maybe I'd let myself go. Maybe I was too focused on Lily. Maybe we just needed a date night. But the most unsettling detail wasn't about David. It was about Lily. My bright, chatty girl grew quiet. Shed watched David and me interact with a solemn, heavy gaze that felt too old for her face. She started having nightmares, wanting to sleep in our bed again, something she hadn't done since she was 6. When I'd ask her what was wrong, she'd just bury her face in my shoulder and say, "Nothing, Mommy. I just love you." I thought it was preteen anxiety, maybe something at school she wasn't ready to share. Then the world stopped. Offices closed, commutes ended, and our family of 3 was marooned together in our house, 247. The forced proximity didn't bring us closer. It stretched the silence between David and me into a intangible thing: a third person in the room. He spent hours locked in the spare bedroom on conference calls, emerging tense and irritable. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I was wiping down the kitchen island for the 10th time that week, lost in a fog of worry and disinfectant. Lily was drawing at the table. She looked up, her pencil hovering, and said, "Mom, do you ever feel like you know a secret that's so big, holding it is making you sick?" Her question landed like a physical weight in my chest. This is where I want to ask you, the people listening. Have you ever had a gut feeling, a deep, cellular knowing that something is wrong, but you chose to ignore it because the truth seemed too terrifying to face? That moment with Lily, the sheer pain in her young eyes, was the end of my ignoring. I put down the cloth. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I think I do." She didn't speak. Instead, she pushed her sketchpad across the table to me. It wasn't one of her usual fantastical landscapes or detailed animal portraits. It was a sequence, like a comic strip. The first panel, a man and a woman I didn't recognize, but the man had David's watch, the one I'd given him for our 10th anniversary. They were in a restaurant. The second, the same couple, hugging in a parking lot under a streetlight. The third, our car in our driveway, with David sitting in the driver's seat, his head in his hands. The fourth, our house, with a tiny figure of Lily at her window, looking down at the car. Below, in her careful handwriting, she had written, "I saw Daddy. He has another family. I am sorry." The world didn't shatter, it dissolved. The sound of the rain outside muffled into a dull roar. I could feel the cold granite of the counter under my palms, the only solid thing left. I looked from the devastating clarity of her drawings to her tear-streaked face. "When?" was all I could manage. In a halting, small voice, she told me. 2 years ago, she'd been playing hide-and-seek at a friend's house in a neighborhood across town. Hiding behind a thick hedge, she saw our car pull up to a house. David got out, and a woman with a little boy, maybe 3 or 4, ran out to meet him. The boy jumped into his arms, yelling "Daddy." David swung him around, kissed the woman, and they all went inside. Lily, terrified and confused, had never said a word. She thought it was her fault. She thought if she told me, our family would break, and it would be because of her. So she carried it, this bomb, through 5th grade, through birthdays and holidays, her love for me locking the secret in. The confrontation wasn't a screaming match. It was worse. It was surgical. I waited until Lily was video chatting with her grandparents, safely upstairs with headphones on. I walked into the spare room where David was on his laptop. I didn't show him the drawings. I simply repeated verbatim what Lily had described: the street name, the color of the house's front door, the little boy's red jacket. I watched the blood drain from his face, watched the careful facade of my husband of 15 years crumble into dust. There was no denial, just a choked, "Sarah, it's not what you think." But it was. His demanding client was his other son, Leo. The woman was Alina. They'd been together for 5 years. He'd met her through work. He claimed he stayed for Lily for our life, that he was trapped and didn't know how to get out. He called it a parallel life, not an affair. The financial betrayal was deep. He'd been siphoning money for years. A second mortgage, college fund for Leo. A life built on lies funded by our joint efforts. The man standing before me was a stranger wearing my husband's skin. In the awful, numb days that followed, there was a bizarre, false moment of hope. David begged. He cried real tears. He promised to end it, to go to therapy, to give me full financial transparency. He said the words, "I love you," with a desperation that almost felt real. For a flicker, the habit of 15 years, the memory of the man he'd been, made me consider it. Maybe, for Lily's sake, but then I'd look at her. I'd see the relief in her eyes now that the secret was out, mixed with a new, profound sadness. Staying would be teaching her that this thy's monumental deception, this fracturing of a family's truth was something a woman should forgive, that her silence was for nothing. The climax didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in our own driveway, under that same streetlight from Lily's drawing. It was the day David moved his things out. The legal machinery was in motion, lawyers, mediators, the cold dissection of assets and parenting plans. But this was the emotional end. He stood by his car, a duffel bag at his feet. He looked at our house, at Lily's window where the curtain was slightly parted. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, the most useless sentence in the English language. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, clear certainty. "You didn't just hurt me, David," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised me. "You made our daughter a prisoner in her own home. You made her protect me from you. For 2 years, my child shouldered your guilt because you were too much of a coward to face it. That's not a mistake. That's a destruction. You don't get to say, 'I love you' here. Love doesn't do this." He flinched as if I'd struck him. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. There were no more words left that mattered. He got in the car and drove away to his other life, the one he'd chosen every day for years. I stood there until the taillights disappeared, feeling the vast, terrifying emptiness of what was left, and beneath it, a single, solid foundation, the truth. Now, it's just Lily and me in the quiet suburban house. The silence is different now. It's not waiting to be broken, it's ours to fill. We talk about everything that hurt, the anger, the weird, unexpected moments of laughter. We are learning a new rhythm. Some days are hard. Some days are peaceful. I look at my daughter, this incredibly brave young woman who sacrificed her own peace to guard mine, and I realize she saved me. She gave me the truth at great cost to herself, and that truth, however painful, was the only real gift left, because you can't rebuild on a lie. You can only build something new, however small, on the solid, shattered ground of what is real. Thank you so much for listening to our story. It's not an easy one to tell, but sharing it feels like a part of our healing. if any of this resonated with you. If you've ever faced a betrayal that redefined your world, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's support each other. And if you want to hear more real, raw stories of relationships and survival, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Your time and your ears mean the world. Story 4. The text message that exposed everything. I am not a snooper. I never was. But the moment I saw the name Leo flash on my husband's phone screen, my entire life, the one I thought we were building, turned into a fragile, beautiful lie. I am Chloe. And this is the story of the night. A single text message shattered my world and revealed that the man I loved had built a second family in the city where he traveled for work. Our life had a rhythm to it, a comfortable suburban melody. Mornings were a symphony of controlled chaos. The scent of burnt toast bends low, patient voice coaxing our 4-year-old daughter, Lily, into her tiny sneakers, the frantic search for my car keys under a pile of mail. We lived in a quiet suburban home with a lawn Ben meticulously mowed every Saturday, a porch swing that creaked in the evening breeze, and a sense of security that felt as solid as the brick facade. Ben was a regional sales manager, which meant he was gone 2 or 3 nights a week. It's the price of the dream, Chloe, he'd say, kissing my forehead before heading out with his wheeled suitcase. This job pays for all of this, and I believed him. I was the architect of our domesticity, holding down my part-time graphic design job, managing Lily's preschool schedule, and keeping the home fires burning. The cracks were subtle, almost imperceptible. They were in the way he'd de-angle his phone screen away from me when he typed, in the new, expensive cologne he started wearing on. I never bought him. In the vague stories about team dinners that ran late, stories that lacked the specific, funny details he used to share. Most of all, it was in the growing distance in his eyes, a polite vacancy that felt worse than any argument. I want to pause here and ask you something, because I think many of you might understand this feeling. Have you ever had a gut feeling you chose to ignore? That tiny, icy whisper in the back of your mind that you drown out with logic, with love, with the fear of what you might find. For months, I told myself I was being paranoid, insecure. I told myself the long silences were just stress, the emotional distance a phase. I convinced myself that building a life meant trusting, and so I trusted until my own intuition felt like the enemy. The escalation began on a Thursday. Ben was supposedly in Chicago for a quarterly review. Lily was asleep. The house was quiet, a tomb of our shared memories. I was folding laundry, a mindless task, when his laptop, left charging on the kitchen counter, chimed with a calendar notification. It was synced to his phone. I shouldn't have looked, but the gut feeling, that whisper, became a roar. The notification read, Leo Pediatrician will check, 3:30 p.m. My blood turned to slush. Leo. The name from the text Id glimpsed weeks ago brushed off as a colleague. Pediatrician. I stood there, a tiny pair of Lily's jeans in my hands, feeling the world tilt off its axis. With trembling fingers, I opened his email. I didn't have to search. There, in the family folder, was a cascade of evidence. Flight confirmations to different city than he told me. Receipts for a women's clothing store not my style. And then the photos. Ben, smiling, holding a toddler boy with dark, curly hair. Ben, with his arm around a woman named Alina, in front of a house with a blue door. A house, a life. The discovery wasn't a single blow, it was 1,000 cuts. The sensory details are burned into me. The cold, smooth texture of the laptop keys, the hum of the refrigerator, the way the digital photos seemed to pulse with a life that was stealing mine. The most mundane object, this laptop, a tool for work, had become the weapon of my destruction. For a week, I lived in a state of surreal, suspended animation. I didn't confront him. I watched him. I studied the man Id married as he played with Lily, as he kissed me goodbye, as he lied with such effortless calm. A part of me, the part that had built a home and a family with him, wanted to find an explanation. Maybe it was a relative he never mentioned, a secret charity work. The false hope was a sedative, allowing me to function, to make Lily's lunches, to smile at the neighbors. I even convinced myself, in a moment of profound desperation, that we could fix this, that if he had another child, we could integrate them somehow. The insanity of that thought now horrifies me. But in that moment, the idea of losing my entire reality was more terrifying than sharing it. I went to a therapist, alone. I sat in her soft, neutral-toned office and said, "I think my husband has another family." Saying it out loud made it real, and the false hope began to crumble like ash. The climax happened in our parked car after work. He just returned from a trip. The air in the car was thick with his new cologne and my silent rage. I couldn't live in the lie for another second. I turned to him, the sunset painting his familiar profile in cruel, warm light. "Who is Leo?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. He froze. I saw the calculation flash in his eyes' denial deflection. Then I said, "And who is Alina? And why does your son have a doctor's appointment in Cincinnati?" The color drained from his face. The confrontation wasn't loud. It was quiet, lethal, and detailed. I recited dates, flight numbers, the color of the house with the blue door. I described the toddler's curls. The emotional truth of that moment wasn't in his eventual, stammering confession, the 2-year affair, the 18-month-old boy, the apartment that had recently become a house. The heartbreak was in the relief that washed over his features once the secret was out. The burden of lying was lifted from him. He cried, but they were the tears of a man caught, not of a man remorseful for the devastation he'd wrought. He said he loved us both, that he was trapped, that he never meant for it to go this far. The words were clichés, hollow shells that echoed in the tomb of our marriage. The climax was the silent understanding that passed between us as he spoke. The man I loved was a stranger, and the life we had was over. In the end, the divorce was less about the legal division of assets and more about the excruciating dissection of a shared dream. The custody battle for Lily was bitter, a protracted war where he fought not out of deep paternal longing, but out of a desire to maintain control and reduce child support. I see him now every other weekend when he picks up our daughter. He is a polite co-parent. He has moved his other family closer. Sometimes I look at my daughter's face and wonder how much of her father's duplicity is woven into her DNA. And then I hate myself for the thought. I survived, but not in the way inspirational quotes promise. I survived like a tree that weathers a storm, bent, scarred, and forever shaped by the wind. I look at my quiet suburban home, and the security it once promised is gone. It's just a house now, filled with the echoes of a love that was never what I believed it to be. The text message didn't just expose his betrayal. It exposed the person I had become while loving Him Somyeon, who would ignore her own truth to preserve a beautiful fiction. Thank you for listening to my story. It's one of the hardest things I've ever shared, but there's a strange comfort in not carrying it alone anymore. If any of this resonates with you, if you've ever faced a betrayal that redefined your world, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's be a community for each other. And if you want to hear more real, raw stories of relationships, survival, and the messy path to healing, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Story 5. The message that unraveled my life, the most devastating truth of my life, didn't come from a screaming match or a discovered love letter. It came in a single, silent line of text, glowing on my husband's phone at 2 in the morning, while he slept peacefully beside me. I am Sarah, and for 12 years, I believed the foundation of my marriage was solid, built on trust and a shared history that stretched back to college. I was wrong. Everything I knew was a carefully maintained facade, and the moment I tapped that screen, the entire structure crumbled into dust around me. Our normal, the one I clung to, looked like this. A quiet suburban home on a cul-de-sac, a golden retriever named Barney, and the comfortable, worn-in rhythm of two people who had navigated their 30s together. James, my husband, was a financial analyst, steady, logical, a man who color-coded our tax files and remembered to change the air filters. I was a freelance graphic designer, working from the sunroom wed converted into a studio. Our life was a series of pleasant routines. Saturday morning farmers markets, takeout on Fridays, watching documentaries in bed until we fell asleep. We were trying for a baby, a hopeful, tender project that had become the quiet center of our private world. The cracks, in retrospect, were there. I just chose to see them as stains on an otherwise perfect fabric, things that could be scrubbed out. His phone, which once charged on the kitchen counter, now lived in his pocket or face down on his nightstand. The new, vague client dinners that ran later than usual. A certain distracted look in his eyes, a distance I attributed to work stress. He'd bought a new cologne, something spicier than his usual clean scent. When Id asked about it, He'd just shrugged and said he felt like a change. A change. I should have known then. Have you ever had a gut feeling? A deep, primal whisper in your chest that you systematically talked yourself out of with logic. You convince yourself you're being paranoid, hormonal, insecure. You list all the reasons your partner is trustworthy, all the years of fidelity, all the practical, mundane realities that make an affair seem ridiculous. That was me for months. I became a detective building a case for my husband's innocence, ignoring the evidence piling up for the prosecution. The escalation began on a Tuesday. James was in the shower, and his phone, left on the bed, buzzed with a notification. It wasn't the buzz that got me. It was the immediate, frantic second buzz, and then a third, a triplet of urgency. The screen lit up. The preview text was from M. It read, "We need to talk about the July situation. It's getting urgent. July situation." My blood went cold. July was when Id had my second miscarriage. It was the darkest month of my life, a time when James had held me as I sobbed, when wed clung to each other in shared grief. What situation could he possibly have with an M from that time? My hand hovered over the phone. I could hear the shower running. This was the line Id never crossed. I valued privacy, but that word urgent pierced through my ethics. I picked it up. His password was still our anniversary. A pathetic little flame of hope flickered. I opened the messages. The thread with M was long. Scrolling up felt like falling down a well. It wasn't filled with poetic declarations of love. It was worse. It was practical, intimate, and devastatingly familiar. Discussions about symptoms, debates about names, a forwarded link to an article about prenatal vitamins, a photo of a sonogram time-stamped mid-July. The message attached to it, can you believe it? After everything, our little miracle, the world tilted. I scrolled faster, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. There were logistics, money transfers discussed, an argument about telling his other family, the words blurred. Then a message from James, "Ill handle Sarah. She's fragile right now. Just give me time to figure out how to tell her it's over." The shower stopped. I put the phone down exactly as it was. My hands were steady. My mind was a white, silent scream. The false hope was a bizarre, surreal period. I didn't confront him. I observed. I became an anthropologist in my own home. I made his favorite meal, meatloaf with garlic mashed potatoes, that night. I watched him eat, laughing at a story about his coworker, and I saw a stranger. A man capable of a double life so vast and cold it took my breath away. He was handling me, fragile Sarah. I felt a terrifying clarity. I needed proof, not just messages. I needed to understand the shape of the lie. A few days later, I told him I was visiting my sister for a weekend. Instead, I followed him from our suburban cul-de-sac to a modest apartment complex 20 minutes away. I watched him park, walk to a door with a spring in his step, and be greeted by a woman with a visible baby bump. She threw her arms around his neck. He kissed her forehead, his hand resting gently on her stomach. The intimacy of the gesture, one I knew so well, shattered the last remaining pane of glass in my soul. Her name, I learned from a discarded piece of mail in the communal trash bin later, was Melissa. The climax wasn't a fight. It was a quiet execution. I waited until he returned home, buoyant and relaxed from his golf game. I was sitting at the kitchen island, a single printed photo of him with Melissa, her bump clear between them, placed on the granite. Next to it, a highlighted bank statement showing regular transfers to an account in her name. I had said nothing to my family, to my friends. I needed to do this alone, to look the monster in the eye without an audience. He walked in, his smile fading as he saw my face, then the photo. The color drained from his. "Sarah," he began, his voice the one he used for delicate client negotiations. "I can explain." "Don't," I said, and my voice was eerily calm. "Is the baby yours?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded, a single, wretched dip of his head. "Since July, the July we lost our baby. It was a mistake. One time. It just happened. And then she got pregnant, and I didn't know how to tell me it's over." I finished, quoting his text. "You were going to leave me for her." He didn't deny it. He started talking, a torrent of excuses, loneliness, my grief pushing him away, the pressure of trying for a baby, a moment of weakness that snowballed. He said he loved me, that he was trapped, that he was trying to protect me. Every word was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. I felt nothing but a profound, hollow cold. The love I had for him, the 12-year history, it didn't vanish in a wave of rage. It simply ceased to exist, as if it had never been real at all. The man before me was a contractor who had built a faulty house, and I was walking out of it forever. The final moment was silent. I slid my wedding ring off and placed it on top of the sonogram picture I'd printed. It made a tiny, definitive click against the granite. I stood up, walked to the guest room, and closed the door. There was nothing more to say. That was 8 months ago. The divorce is finalized. James is living with Melissa and their newborn son. I sold the house on the cul-de-sac. I see a therapist now, not to cope with the loss of him, but to unravel why I didn't see it, why I made a shrine of our normalcy. I am learning to rebuild a life on a foundation of truth, even if that truth is that I was living a lie for a very long time. The strange part is, the deepest hurt isn't the betrayal itself anymore. It's the theft of my own past. Every happy memory is now a crime scene I have to reinvestigate. I don't know if I'll ever trust love again, but I am learning to trust the quiet, steady voice in my own chest that I ignored for so long. And sometimes that feels like enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's one of the hardest things I've ever shared, but there's a strange comfort in knowing you're not alone in the complexities of love and heartbreak. If any part of this resonated with you, or if you've ever faced a betrayal that made you question your own reality, I'd be so grateful if you'd share your thoughts or your own story in the comments below. Let's support each other. And if you want to hear more real, raw stories of relationships and survival, please hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. Story 6. The Call from My Husband's Son. There are moments that split your life into a before and an after. A single phone call can be a guillotine, severing the person you were from the person you're forced to become. For me, that call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was elbow deep in potting soil, trying to remember who I was outside of being a wife. The voice on the other end was young, trembling with a courage he clearly didn't feel, and he said 7 words that unraveled my entire world. I think my dad is your husband. My name is Chloe. For 15 years, my life was a carefully curated exhibit of normalcy. Ryan and I lived in a quiet suburban home with a blue door and hydrangeas I could never quite get to bloom right. Our marriage was a comfortable sweater, a little worn in the elbows, but warm. We had our routines. Every morning, Ryan would make the coffee too strong, and I'd pour half of mine into the sink when he wasn't looking. He'd kiss me on the forehead, his lips a dry, familiar press, and say, "Love you, see you at 6." I'd wave from the kitchen window, watching his sedan disappear down the tree-lined street. The cracks, if I am honest, were there. They were in the way he'd sometimes look at me like he was searching for a version of me he remembered from a decade ago. They were in the separate bank account he'd opened for investment purposes that he was oddly secretive about. They were in the business trips that always seemed to fall on the 3rd weekend of the month, and the way his phone, which used to charge on the nightstand, now lived in his home office overnight. I chose to see them as quirks, the natural weathering of a long-term partnership. I told myself I was being paranoid, that security sometimes feels a lot like boredom. Have you ever had a gut feeling you chose to ignore? A tiny, insistent voice you drowned out with logic and laundry and the sheer effort of daily life. I'd love to know if you have, because sometimes I think that's the most human thing of all, to look at the cracks in your foundation and decide firmly to paint over them. The escalation began not with a bang, but with a notification. Ryan was in the shower, and his laptop, which he never left open, was chiming on the dining table. It was a calendar alert. Luca's birthday, dinner 7 p.m. and Gilo's. Luca's. I knew a Luca's from his work, a guy in his 50s. This felt different. My heart started a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. I clicked. The calendar entry was recurring yearly on March 15th for the past 12 years. There was an address attached. It wasn't a restaurant. It was a residential address in a town 40 minutes away. The shower stopped. I closed the laptop, my fingers leaving smudges on the sleek metal case. That was the moment the comfortable sweater began to itch. I started paying attention. I found receipts in his gym bag for a toy store I'd never heard of, a charge on our shared credit card for a pediatric dentist, and then the email. He'd asked me to find a confirmation number for a hotel, and as I searched his inbox, I saw it. The subject line was blank. The sender was an address I didn't recognize. The preview text read, "Ryan, he needs to meet you. He's asking questions I can't answer anymore. This isn't fair to any of us, especially not Luca's." The world didn't spin. It just went very, very still and terribly quiet. I confronted him that night, my voice eerily calm. I showed him the email on my phone. He went pale, then red, then a sickly gray. He didn't deny it. He just crumpled onto the couch, his head in his hands. "It was before we were serious," he whispered. "It was a fling. She got pregnant. She decided to keep it. I've been helping them financially. That's all it is, Chloe, I swear. You're my wife. This is my life," he cried. He begged. He promised it was just a financial obligation, a mistake from his youth that he was legally bound to. He called it a complicated responsibility. He never called it a son. In my desperation to salvage my world, I chose to believe the less monstrous version. We went to therapy. He showed me bank statements, a strict ledger of support. He promised transparency. For a few months, we walked on eggshells, trying to glue the pieces back into a shape that resembled a marriage. It was a false hope, brittle and thin as ice. The climax wasn't a fight. It was a phone call. That Tuesday afternoon, I answered, expecting a telemarketer. "Is this Chloe?" the young voice asked. "My name is Lucas. I am 12. I found your number on my mom's phone. She talks about you sometimes. She says you don't know about me." He took a shaky breath. "I think my dad is your husband." And then he said the thing that shattered the ice completely. He comes to my games. He took me to get my first bike. He told me he loves me, but he can't live with us because of his job. But I saw his pay stub in Mom's folder. His job is here in our town. The boy's voice cracked. "Does he love you more?" In that moment, I didn't see Ryan as a liar. I saw him through the eyes of a 12-year-old boy who was trying to understand why his father had another family, another home, another woman he came home to. I was no longer just the betrayed wife. I was an unwitting participant in the betrayal of a child. The emotional calculus of my Mariagatha years, the shared history, the comfortable love melted away under the raw, simple pain in that boy's question. I didn't have an answer for him. I just listened as he cried. This stranger who was my husband's son, and I felt a surge of grief so profound it was for all of us, for me, for Lucas, for his mother, even in a distant way, for the man who had built this labyrinth of lies. I ended the call and sat on the floor of my sunroom, the smell of soil suddenly cloying. Ryan came home at 6, like always. He called out, "Honey, I am home." Like he was in a sitcom. I didn't answer. I just walked into the hallway, holding my phone. I saw the moment he knew. His smile didn't fade. It simply evaporated. "Lucas called me today," I said, my voice hollow. "He asked me if you love me more than you love him." There was no rage, no screaming. The confrontation was over. Revelation was complete. He sank to the floor, right there in the foyer, his back against our blue front door. He had no lies left. The full weight of his double-lifeth birthdays, the school plays, the bedtime stories in another house, the love he gave to another child settled in the space between us, a continent of deceit we could never cross. I filed for divorce. The last time I saw Ryan was in a courtroom hallway, a sterile, fluorescent-lit space that smelled of lemon cleaner and despair. He looked old. We didn't speak. I walked out into the autumn air alone, the title of wife officially stripped from me, replaced by nothing yet. I am not okay, but I am here. And sometimes, in the quiet of my new, smaller apartment, I find myself thinking not about the husband I lost, but about the boy who found me. And I wonder if, in the wreckage of our broken families, we might both somehow learn what a real, honest love looks like. Thank you for listening to my story. It's one of the hardest things I've ever shared. If you've ever faced a betrayal that redefined your world, or if you've had to rebuild from the ground up, I'd be so grateful if you'd share your own experiences in the comments below. Your stories remind me I am not alone. If you found this video compelling, please give it a like and subscribe for more real, raw stories about love, loss, and survival. Story 7. The receipt that unraveled our life. I found the truth tucked between the grocery receipts. A secret so mundane in its hiding place, it felt like a second, deeper betrayal. The paper was cool and smooth against my fingertips, a stark contrast to the fire suddenly raging in my chest. It was for a necklace, a delicate silver chain with a small, teardrop sapphire. I'd never seen it. It was dated 2 weeks ago, a Tuesday, the day David said he was working late to finalize the quarterly reports. The total was $1,850, and it was charged to our joint savings account, the one labeled Maya's college fund. My name is Sarah. For 12 years, I defined myself as David's wife, Ben's mom, a project manager who kept the trains running on time for my family and my job. Our life was a carefully constructed ecosystem of school runs, mortgage payments, and weekend trips to Home Depot. It wasn't a grand passion anymore, but it was ours. It was solid, or so I believed, right up until the moment I was kneeling on the cold kitchen tile, recycling bin appended around me, holding that flimsy slip of thermal paper that felt heavier than our entire wedding album. The crack appeared on a perfectly normal Thursday morning. David was buttering his toast, his brow furrowed at his phone. "Stupid calendar glitch," he muttered, not to me, but to the screen. It keeps keeps deleting my personal entries." He said it with a flicker of irritation that seemed just a little too sharp for a minor tech hiccup. I shrugged, pouring orange juice for our 10-year-old Ben. "Sync it again," I said, my voice automatic. But I noticed his knuckles were white around his phone. Later, as I was loading the dishwasher, I found a single, long, blonde hair caught in the drain. My hair is a dark, unruly brown. I stared at it, a silent, foreign invader in our stainless steel sink, before rinsing it down with a blast of scalding water. I told myself it was from a colleague, from the gym, from anywhere, but where my gut, now a tight, cold coil, was telling me it was from. The real unraveling began with a forgotten lunch. David had a big client meeting and asked me to drop his laptop bag at his office. I didn't mind. It was a chance to steal him for a quick coffee. His assistant, Lisa, a sweet girl who'd been with him for years, greeted me with a strained smile. "He's in a conference call, Sarah. You can leave it here." As I set the bag down, I saw it. Peeking from the side pocket, next to a pack of gum, was a tube of lipstick, a shade of deep, almost violent plum. I never wore lipstick. I never wore that color. It looked cheap and garish. My hand hovered over it. I could have asked. I could have laughed it off. Instead, I felt a profound, chilling sense of trespass, as if I were the one doing something wrong by seeing it. I left without saying another word, the image of that lipstick burning behind my eyes. That night, David was affectionate, overly so. He rubbed my shoulders, asked about my day with intense focus, and suggested we open a bottle of wine. It felt like performance, a script written to placate a suspicious audience. I played my part, smiling, nodding, while inside, a silent alarm was blaring. In bed, he fell asleep instantly, his breathing deep and even. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the ghost of that purple lipstick smearing across my mind. I replayed every late night, every sudden business trip, every time his phone had buzzed and he de-angled the screen away. The evidence was circumstantial, a collection of dust motes in a sunbeam. But they were gathering into a shape I could no longer ignore. Have you ever had a gut feeling you chose to ignore? That primal voice that whispers a truth you are not ready to hear. We're taught to be rational, to communicate, to trust. But what happens when every cell in your body is screaming that the person you built your life with is a stranger? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. The recycling bin was my last resort. A pathetic, cliché last resort. I told myself I was looking for a packing slip for a return, but I was digging for bones, and I found one. That receipt. The numbers swam before my eyes. The date, the time 6:47 p.m. The store I knew was across town from his office. The devastating amount. My daughter's future, traded for a piece of jewelry for another woman. The room tilted. The hum of the refrigerator grew deafening. I remember the exact texture of the paper, the slightly faded ink, the way my own breathing sounded like it was coming from another room. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a fact, printed in black and white. I sat there on the floor for a long time, the receipt clutched in my hand, the rest of the discarded life scattered around me. Confrontation came not as an explosion, but as a quiet, deadened thing. I placed the receipt on the kitchen island next to his coffee mug the next morning. Ben was already at school. The silence was thick, suffocating. David came in, whistling, and stopped dead. He looked at the paper, then at me. All the color drained from his face. "Sarah," he began, his voice a dry rasp. "Who is she?" My own voice was terrifyingly calm. It all tumbled out then, not in a torrent of remorse, but in a defensive, logistical dump. Her name was Alina, a junior analyst. It was a mistake. It was over. It meant nothing. He was under stress. He was sorry. The words were so stale, so painfully predictable. They made me physically nauseous. He cried. He begged. He said the necklace was a parting gift, a guilt-ridden attempt to end it. He promised to return it, to put the money back. He reached for me, and I flinched so violently he stumbled back. The man in front of me was a puppet reciting lines from a bad movie. The David I knew was gone. In his place was this pleading, exposed stranger. We went to therapy. That was the false hope. Dr. Evans, with her gentle voice and potted ferns, became the audience for our tragedy. David performed perfectly. He took accountability. He expressed regret. He listed the ways he failed. He committed to transparency on passwords, location sharing, weekly check-ins. For a few weeks, I clung to the structure of it. We had homework. We scheduled connection time. I tried to map the new, devastated landscape of my marriage to see if anything could be rebuilt upon the fault line of his betrayal. He was trying, and part of me, the part that was terrified of dismantling our family, wanted nothing more than to believe the map could be redrawn. I wanted the before. I ached for it. The climax didn't happen in a therapist's office or a screaming match. It happened on a Tuesday evening while I was paying bills online. David was in the shower. His phone, now perpetually left on the kitchen counter as a symbol of his newfound honesty, buzzed with a calendar notification. Dinner W.E. 8 p.m. It was for that very night. The world didn't tilt this time. It simply went still and very, very clear. The cold, clinical clarity was worse than any panic. He came out, towel around his waist, smiling sheepishly. "Forgot to tell you, I have that late finance meeting tonight. Might be a long one." I looked up from my laptop. I didn't show him the phone. I didn't yell. I just said, "Don't bother coming back." He froze. "What? The performance is over, David. I am not your audience anymore. Your dinner with Alina is at 8. You should go. You should stay." The transformation on his face was something I will never forget. The practiced remorse melted into shock, then into a startling, defiant anger. The mask finally fell all the way off. "You're checking my phone now. After everything we've been working on, you're never going to trust me again, are you? Yurei just looking for a reason to end this. And there it was, the stunning, breathtaking reversal. My discovery of his ongoing lie was now my failure, my betrayal of the reconciliation process. In that moment, I saw the true depth of it. This wasn't a man who made a mistake. This was a man who lived a parallel life and was furious he'd been evicted from it. The fight that followed was ugly, full of truths that had been festering for years. But its core was that single, silent realization. The love was not just broken, it was a fiction he had long since abandoned. I asked for a divorce. He moved out that night. The silence he left behind was the most honest sound our house had made in years. Now the divorce papers are sitting on the table, waiting for my signature. Ben is staying with my sister for the weekend. This house, our quiet suburban home, echoes with ghost of the family we were, the ghost of the man I thought I married, and the quieter, steadier ghost of the woman I used to be, the one who believed in the solidity of receipts and routines and promises. I am someone else now, someone who knows that sometimes the most profound endings don't come with a slam of the door, but with the whisper of thermal paper and the deafening silence of a truth finally acknowledged. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's a painful one to share, but there's a strange comfort in knowing we're not alone in our heartbreaks. If this resonated with you, or if you've ever faced a betrayal that changed everything, I'd be so grateful if you'd share your own experiences or words of support in the comments below. Let's be a community for each other. And if you want to hear more real, raw stories of relationships, survival, and the messy path to healing, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more Reddit relationship stories.